Hi, I'm Carl Taylor from Visual Education. Welcome to our series of lighting modifier videos and explanations. This week's video, we are going to be looking at the humble but very useful lighting modifier called the snoot. So in our last lighting modifier video, we looked at the honeycomb grid sets where we had the wide, medium and tight honeycomb grids, and we saw how they made a small ball of light for you, and we looked at the different ways that you could use that. Now a snoot is similar in that it also makes a small ball of light, but it's very much more defined, very much more a circle of light. But it's a very useful lighting modifier for different applications, usually made of metal, black to just stop the light escape, a simple hole opening. No honeycomb grid in this case, it's literally just the opening hole seeing straight down to the flash tube or LED, depending as you're using it, and then of course the mounting plate to fit whatever brand of light that you're using. Now nearly all manufacturers of lighting, be it continuous, LED, studio flash, whatever, they all usually have a snoot in the lineup. Now the snoot attaches onto your studio lamp head, and let's look at the resulting light that we get on the wall. And you can see there, unlike the previous honeycomb grids that we looked at, you can see that the circle of light is very much more defined with a sharper edge because we don't have that honeycomb grid. As such, the shadow as well is very much more sharper and more defined. We're not getting a double-edged or diffused shadow, we're getting very much more a clean and crisp shadow. As a matter of fact, you may be able to see what looks like a secondary shadow there at the moment, but that's actually only from our video lights. If we actually just get this to look here, you'll see that the shadow is very much more crisp and clearly defined when we're using the snoot. Now, a word of warning, and I can tell you this from past experience. Already now, this snoot, only being on that light for a few seconds, is burning hot. Too hot to touch. Recently on a shoot, I accidentally made the mistake of touching the snoot on my forearm during the shoot. Ow, just burnt myself. And it was like Kane from Kung Fu picking up that hot boiling cauldron of liquid, and I suitably damaged my forearm for a month or so with the burn mark. Now, the purpose of a snoot is to create a small ball of light where you need it, but one that doesn't have that sort of softened edge like a honeycomb grid, or even more so like a Fresnel that we'll be looking in another episode. Now, additionally to the snoot on its own, if you want to define the light even smaller, you can use honeycomb grids with the snoot, so that then can make the patch of light a little bit more diffused or make it even smaller. Some of the snoots have sets of honeycombs that can fit over the end, so that you can put different beam width honeycombs on there to create smaller and smaller patches of light. If we go over to this light, this is a smaller Pico light, and this has a snoot on the end. Looks a little bit different, but essentially it's the same thing. It's just a conical bit of metal. But on this one, I have 2 or 3 finer honeycombs inserted in there. So it's got a spring, and I can pop that on there. And that light creates a very small patch of light there that's a lot softer because of the multiple honeycomb grids that are in there at the moment. So depending on the snoot setup and the type of snoot and the amount of honeycomb grids, you can create ever more concentrated patches of light for small areas that you need to illuminate. Now, although snoots are relatively inexpensive lighting modifiers, you can also make your own. If I take this studio light here, which has got standard P70 reflector on, sort of normal fair standard reflector, here I've just made a cardboard snoot. Just roll up a piece of card, tape it so it doesn't unravel, cut the end off, and where you cut the end off and how wide back you cut it will decide how tight your snoot is. And you can take this and then simply place it over your lamp, as I'm doing there. You need to get it lined up, and there you can see we've got a snooted light there at the moment. Ignore the sort of image forming that we're getting there from the modelling lamp inside. That's just a sort of camera obscura effect going on from the sort of pinhole effect of the snoot. But when we fire the flash, then it would be a little bit different. Now, of course, you can still put grids or hold a grid in front of the end of this cardboard snoot. What you do need to be careful with, if you're using your own homemade snoots like that, be careful for the fire hazard of this getting too hot and potentially catching fire, being a cardboard material. Better if you could probably use some sort of metal foil or something instead. But you can see we've still got quite an effective ball of light there on the wall by using this homemade cardboard snoot. So I've used cardboard homemade snoots all the time for lighting different little labels and things as well. Now, there's not much else to really say about snoots. That's what they do, that's what they are. Let's take a look at the results you get in our lighting comparison app on visualeducation.com. So here on the left, I have selected the P70 honeycomb grid, the P70 with the medium honeycomb grid that we looked at in one of the last episodes. And you can see that ball of light, patch of light, and the strong definition of the shadow. And then on the right here, you can see the conical snoot, which was this one here that's being used for that photograph. And you can see that they're both creating small ball of light. Maybe it's slightly tighter with the snoot. So if I go to the tight grid, you see the tight grid is actually tighter than the snoot. So the snoot is falling somewhere between the two. But what's really interesting is the effect of the light. And if we take a closer look and I zoom in on the comparison tool, look at the shadow under the chin. And what you'll notice with the snoot is that the shadow is much sharper and well defined. We've got that clearer shadow, like I was trying to demonstrate earlier with my hand, is that the snoot gives us a crisper, sharper defined shadow than we would get with a honeycomb grid. And that can be quite important because often in product photography where you want to reduce the size of the light source, because remember, reducing the size of the light source closer and closer to a pin light source creates sharper shadows. There might be instances where I'm doing a cosmetic shot, for example, and I need to define some really beautiful, strong shadows on my floor or on my surface, and then I may consider using a bare bulb light, or I might consider using a snoot to do that instead of a honeycomb grid, because as you can see, a honeycomb grid does not give me those largely highly defined shadows that I'm getting there with the snoot. So you get that extra sort of crispness, if you like, with the shadows. If we go to full length shot and full length shot, kind of similar there in terms of what's going on in the pooling and area of light. But if you notice the difference of the shadow on the wall behind, you see that slightly softer edge shadow here with the honeycomb grid, and then a very much more crisp, defined shadow on the wall from the model with the snoot. So snoots, relatively inexpensive. Definitely have one in your studio lineup of modifiers, and I'm sure you'll find lots and lots of uses for it. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you enjoyed it, please like the video and click the subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next lighting modifier episode.